Mentz Off the Fence, where Mr. Mentz and Mrs. Swank answer questions related to whatever topics you provide.
If you are a student at GCHS, listen up.
Nothing we say here is the express opinion or view of Greensburg Community Schools. But if you have a question burning a hole through your brain, email us.
Who knows, your question might inspire us. Now let's get on with the show. All right, Swank. Well, we have decided, we made the executive decision to make a second part of our last week's episode on fear. We didn't say who provided that question to us, but it was a good question, and it's been thought-provoking for me anyways. And I did a lot of research on it because I was interested in the fear response.
That's showing me up there a little bit. I didn't know we were going to research, but I'm ready.
Well, I got into a rabbit hole, you know.
No, I have, in the last year or so, I've really because of Huberman, a little bit, to be honest, a podcast that we both listen to, Huberman Lab. I have had a little interest myself, so I'm curious what you're going to bring.
Yeah, well, I mean, we felt like we did a pretty good job when we closed the show out last week, but then I think we both got to thinking that maybe we just scratched the surface and we didn't really provide any or too much useful information for the students to, actively combat fear or talk about maybe what some of their fears might be. So we kind of made some notes, and we're going to recoup and regroup and come back at it with Fear Part 2.
Yeah, sounds fantastic.
Cool.
You made a short list. I thought it was really, really good. Yeah, you okay if I just share that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. So you emailed me a list, and it said leaving home for the workforce or for college, and I think you had one of them, but I kind of added, kids are leaving home for all different kinds, or just to get it out of there, kind of. Getting a job, failure. So these are all intermixed, but at the same time, there could be fear related to all of them. Looking stupid, not fitting in, and isolation, kind of we group together. And then just being uncomfortable in a situation.
Right. This was kind of my just list of what I thought that students might be going through, which is kind of a dangerous path to go down, just assuming. But I think that they all kind of link back to each other in a certain way. They're kind of all related to the same fear response that we get. I think what we were ultimately trying to come up with this week was, what can we provide students, where they're at in the season of life that they're in, to actively use to combat the fear that they're feeling, or the anxiety or stress that they're feeling. Kind of lumped all those things together because they're very, very similar, the way that our bodies react to those things.
Yeah, and the brain.
In the brain, yeah, specifically.
Well, brain body, but like I was just listening to a podcast the other day talking about how it's this psychiatrist from Harvard who talked about how the subconscious plays so much of a role, and like it's like an iceberg. What you're conscious of is just a little tiny part of what your brain is experiencing and doing, and fear plays a fair amount in that.
That is interesting. I hadn't really thought about the subconscious, but it does kind of play into something that I researched as well. So the path that I went down when I was doing my research was just figuring out why we experience fear, at least like what is the process of our bodies that in our bodies that happen when we're feeling that fear and anxiety and stress, which when you go down that path is helpful for understanding how to combat it.
You and I went to a training on this together. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like before COVID?
Right.
Are you going to talk about the amygdala?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, awesome.
Actually.
Let's do it.
That was a good memory. I didn't even remember that we talked about that in that class.
The lady made a fist.
Yeah, that's right.
She popped when your amygdala. I'm not, I'm not trying to steal your thunder. Go.
No, I'm glad that you remembered it.
I'm excited.
My memory stinks. So I had, my research is fun for me because I learn the same thing over and over again, and it's still exciting. You know what I mean? There are certain things that just set off this response in the amygdala. That's a part of your brain, in the back of your brain by the brainstem. And when these things set the amygdala off and it kind of takes over, it basically gives you this fear response where it puts adrenaline and cortisol into your body and just kind of dumps it into your body. So like your blood flows away from your brain and away from your central part of your body into your limbs. So it kind of gives you that fight or flight response.
Or freeze is what I've learned
or
recently.
Freeze.
Or
yeah.
freeze, another F, which is kind of fascinating because you can see it play out not only in your own like fight, flight, or freeze. It's not like you're deciding to do that. It's your brain, the amygdala going, oh my gosh, I've seen this before.
Yeah, it kind of takes over. And it's something that we're provided with as a preservation response. So anytime that we're in fear is probably because that we've conditioned our amygdala to tell us to create this chemical response in our bodies to create fear, and that response that we get from the amygdala that dumps all these chemicals into our body that tells us you need to back off from what you're doing. The reason that you're scared of the dark because your amygdala is telling you there's something scary that happens in the dark. Even though like you may be well aware, like if the lights are on, I'm good. There's nothing scary in this room. The lights go out. That triggers your brain, your amygdala to respond to and fear. And so knowing that and trying to just figure out when that fear response happens, how to control that, how to exercise it, I guess, if you will, should help people understand that maybe the fear or the anxiety or the stress that they're feeling is a result of that cortisol dumping into their body, that adrenaline pumping into their through their blood, and then just taking a second to say, whoa, wait a second, amygdala, take a back seat. I'm driving, and now I'm in control. Okay, I got the situation. It's the same room I was just in when it was light. Shut up, amygdala. I'm not scared. You know what I mean? Instead of just, skirting through the house being like, oh, man, there's a monster down there.
Yeah.
Even though you know there's not. So you can control it. Now, it's not that simple. I mean, we're sitting in a room saying that where we're comfortable, understanding that when you come to a point in your life where you're feeling like there's something that's causing that fear or anxiety or stress, that's the response that you're getting for that reason, because you have trained your amygdala to do that in some way or shape or form in the past, like something in some past event has caused that to happen.
Yeah,
So
and
now,
I don't even know if it has to be something that you did. It's just something you experienced. The way things played out in the past. Now you have a fear response, right?
Mm-hmm.
For it could have been something that you did, but it also could just be you were around something that created that fear, that same fear response when you were. Listen to us. We're not psychologists, but we're just readers, and consumers of podcasts. But like, right. It's amazing and also terrifying how our past, all the way back into childhood, can play into our future, like very deeply. Mm-hmm. And you don't even have to be, from what I understand, you don't even have to be conscious, like actively conscious of what that thing was from before. You might be, but you might not be. And it takes some thought to get back to, okay, why am I having this response right now? Why is my amygdala? I mean, the lady that we went to the training said it's like it pops, like it sends the chemicals out into your bloodstream. And if I recall, I'd have to look this up, but something like 20 minutes before you're like everything's sort of rebalanced. It doesn't mean that you can be a raging lunatic or curled up in a ball for 20 minutes. You might be, I guess, but the strategies for how to combat that are important. No,
I agree. And I think that was kind of where I was going with the subconscious and just, not really understanding where it all comes from, but just understanding that it's in there somewhere. And just like, if you can take the approach of, well, I know exactly what just happened because I know now that my brain is doing this thing and it's, and the chemicals are working in this way, then it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a more practical approach instead of just being a victim of it.
I think it's important too to recognize that being aware of oneself, like the active effort it takes to be aware of yourself in any given situation and not just be to be present to what is happening in your mind and in your body, especially in the times that aren't easy. That alone is not easy. That takes practice, I think.
Yeah.
And to be, this is going to sound a little hokey, but to take a moment to take stock during a troublesome time and think, okay, am I breathing rapidly? Is my head filling me with negative thoughts? Is my body tense? Like most of the time we're not really aware of ourselves even when times are good.
Mm.
So when something has upset us in a way where we want to flee or fight or freeze, and the amygdala is popped, it's even tougher to go, okay, I probably need to do this strategy right now, because your brain is going, it's like back in caveman time, it's like, get me out of here, or I just want to punch you in the face or whatever. But to become aware of oneself, I think is a key piece.
Yeah. Well, I think we can also exercise on a lesser level. Like I'm fairly certain that this response happens too when we're just uncomfortable, or like say when when our body wants to take the easy route. Like, well, I could do this right now, but I could also just sit on my phone and not do that. I think that's a similar response to where when we're procrastinating and putting things off out of comfort. I think at that point, if we can realize that, like, wow, I just made a comfort-based decision that I know I'm going to regret later, and then, change it and say, okay, wait a second, amygdala, again, take a back seat. I'm going to do this uncomfortable thing now so that I can be more comfortable later. Then you're exercising that responsive, what was the way I put it earlier, our preservation, our self-preservation. We want to preserve our energy, and we want to not be uncomfortable. And so just making yourself more uncomfortable more often, taking the harder path, that kind of thing, I think can exercise that amygdala to the point where you are more in control of it than you currently are.
Yeah, I don't know how much at that part of the brain we have a whole lot of control on what to like, because it's, from what I understand, and I'd have to research a little more, but it's a real basic part of our brain, like a very responsive section. But I think the frontal lobe is the one that goes, it reasons, it like sorts through things, it makes sense of things. And when the amygdala is going, I think it cuts off the frontal lobe.
Yeah.
And so we're, I really battle with the whole idea of like, are we capable? Because in my mind, we're capable.
Yeah,
like
I think so.
I really have a hard time with, this person is struggling and they're not capable of making a rational decision because there's a piece of the brain that's cutting them off. I struggle with that because I'm like, I've been plenty afraid, and still, I'm not talking about like catatonic, where you're like, you're having some sort of psychotic break or something like that, which has not happened to me. But you never know.
Not yet.
But not today. I think making the best choices in the moments that are the hardest, it builds character. And I think it's something that we should try to practice as human beings, especially in today's culture, because you will be, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, you'll be a better person for being more aware of what's going on in your own head and body.
I think too, like, so in a practical way that you could exercise this as a student, like the number one fear in America is public speaking by far.
Yeah.
And that's the same for, I would say, I couldn't even put a number to it, but it's got to be like in the 90s, right? Like there's so many people that are afraid of public speaking.
Yeah, and when the audience grows, it just gets worse and worse. I know when I was a student, and probably when you were a student, when you had to do a presentation, there wasn't a way out. Or at least it had to be something pretty major. Now, if we require some sort of presentation, there's a healthy amount of kids that just will not get up and do it.
Yeah.
And the consequence being a 0 or whatever, it is like, nope, I'm taking a 0.
Yeah.
Which culturally it's shifted, where just face your fear, and there's cajoling and come on, you got this, and support, and no one's gonna say anything. I'll make sure you're in a environment where you can do it regardless of how well you do it. And it's a flat out refusal.
Yeah, it has to be a controlled environment. I think that helps with most people, but there are some that just won't, and that's a problem that they're gonna face often for the rest of their life. And if they're doing it just for a simple school assignment where they have to talk in front of their friends about stuff that they know well, like in my class we do that, and it's just tell me about yourself, and then tell me something that you know how to do very easily, like brush your teeth, and just walk through the steps of doing that. And I still have people who refuse to do it, and it's like, these are your friends, or at least, maybe not their friends, but your peers. Like, if you care that much about what they think about you, or if you're that afraid of what they think about you, you're the one that needs to do this.
Yeah, there's a healthy amount of fear. Every day I battle with the seniors, and you're talking the oldest kids in the building.
Mm-hmm.
A healthy amount of, I don't want to answer a question. This isn't even public speaking. This is just participation. And I mean at all levels, honors, college prep, general. Really, in some ways, it is an impediment to learning that is the elephant in the room. Because if you and I know, because we're older, but if you walk into a learning environment and you just want someone to spoon feed you the information and then you just write it down and regurgitate it later, that is probably the worst scenario for how to learn. Like, just talk to me, give me the information, I'll write it down in my notes, and then I'm going to puke it back to you.
Yeah.
With no practical practice or facilitation of meaning or like how it applies or when to do it or doing it.
It's terrible.
It's awful. And there's just an expectation, I think, in large part because of fear, that I don't want to be a participant in my learning. I just want you to tell me.
Yeah, it's such a limiting factor. I think just so calling attention to yourself by just raising your voice and speaking out in class.
Yes.
That's something that people fear. Also,
they don't want to be wrong.
The prospect of being wrong.
Yes.
And maybe being made fun of, which is unlikely. Maybe in some classes it's more likely than others. Maybe
after class or something like that, perhaps. But to what end?
Right. Why does it matter? Yeah. So just having the attention called to you, being wrong. These two things are something that people are afraid of. And if that is you, you're robbing yourself of a learning experience, and that stinks for you.
Amen. I can't even tell you that I try to tell the kids, like, this kind of fear is not serving you as a human being, as a learning person. And I battle it, but I don't know how to help them in that regard. Like, when I look at your list for today, I'm like, okay, I can speak to fear on these things. How to speak to the fear of not caring about the Joe student next to you who's going to, say something snarky about your wrong answer, when I think most teachers, at least here, would not dog someone for a bad answer. I mean, I kind of love the bad answers, quote, bad answers, as much as I love the good ones, because there's always something to teach through the wrong answers as well as the right answers.
Yeah, I agree with that. My approach to that usually is just like, I try to be the first one to respond, and I respond positively first. Hey, thanks for that answer. But, you might have been off the mark here before I let somebody else even have the opportunity to do it. But I realize that I run a classroom way different than most too. Yeah. So,
what would you say to a kid who says, I can't, like, Mentz, you don't get it. You're not in these classes, or I'm scared to death of Joe Schmo who has given me crap for 5 years, and every time I open my mouth he's got some comment, or I don't think the teacher wants my kind of answer anyway, or whatever. What would you say to that kid?
Usually I ask if in that scenario, what is promoting the positively, to his experience, and what's not, and if somebody saying an off comment to him is that big of a factor to him, then he needs to speak up. He or she, I suppose. But I usually say, is it that big of a deal? Does that kid's comment mean that much to you? And usually they say, well, no, not really. And like, when you actually present it to them like that, they're like, yeah, I guess you're right. It's not that big of a deal. But maybe they just never have thought about it before, and they just let it eat at them and eat at them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I try to shut it off, but the environment in my room is kind of the locker room environment anyways, because it's mostly guys, and that kind of stuff happens. But at the same time, like, that's kind of what guys do. That's what we talked about the military does. Like, you're supposed to jab each other a little bit and toughen each other up, and we've lost that along the way.
Yeah, we have lost the thicker skin, right? But there's some days when I'm like, maybe it's always been like this.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it just, there's always been the different sorts of folks. I don't know, but look, I'm getting off. Okay. I think particularly in your list, the fear of, because we just basically were talking about fear of failure.
Right.
Because not answering like fear of failure just has its little mini version and its medium version, and it's like paralysis where I'm not going to go do anything because if I fail, then screw it. I shouldn't have done it. But the getting a job is really, really powerful for me, because getting paralyzed because you fear the unknown of the new experience. So whether that's going and becoming a cashier at McDonald's, or a cook at McDonald's, or if you want to work at El Reparo and be a waiter or waitress or something, or you want to go work in a factory, every single job I have ever had, that first day fear is palpable. And it's not, I wouldn't even call it fear. I would call it the unknown. And it creates this anxiety and stress because you don't know where anything is. You don't know the people around you. You don't really know your boss. And you can even take this to the interview process. Like, I love the fear of the interview because it fuels my energy in the interview. I turn it and I make it behave. I make that fear of the interview suit me. And what I mean is I go, I put it in the corner and I say, okay, I'm going to draw from this energy and I'm going to nail this interview so I can get the job. Well, then I get the job and then I have to show up. And It's not have to. It's like, okay, I wanted this job. It doesn't matter if you're talking about, I worked in an ice cream store when I was a teenager and a movie theater when I was a teenager, and the Army, the first day when they come to get you to go to basic, it's terrifying. Then getting to basic is terrifying. But it's only a different kind of terrifying than working in the ice cream store when I didn't know how to make a banana split. I mean, it was, I used to dread someone ordering something I didn't know how to make, but at the same time I was like, well, then I can make it. Then I can learn. Right. So there's this, just because there's a duality of fear, I think when it comes to jobs, taking the fear and letting it work for you and saying, okay, I need some fuel in my tank, right? I have this anxiety. I'm going to feel like a rock star if I get through this day, when I get through this day. And I start to know where things are and I don't have to ask so many questions. And I think that's another piece. People don't want to ask questions because they feel like they're, it's a weakness or something. I think asking questions is a sign of strength. Yeah, I agree. And so to turn the fear of the new environment, job, interview, whatever, and make it behave for you, it's freeing and it's a source of fuel. It's not roses and butterflies, but it's later on when you look back, you feel like you've achieved something. And when that job doesn't feel so scary after week 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be, because every day it lessens just a little bit. Facing the fear, it gets a little bit smaller, and you just scrunch it down just a little bit more. And meanwhile, you're taking from it and going, I'm coming back. I'm coming back tomorrow. I think that's it may not be a strategy you could read about, but it's the strategy that I've used for a lot of my life.
Yeah, it's a good calculated strategy, and I think we mentioned this last time, like fear as a powerful motivator. If you are understanding that fear can be a good thing, like the reason that you have this response from your amygdala is because you're nervous about it, you're anxious about it, and that's probably a good thing because you're pushing out of your comfort zone a little bit. So you should identify like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Okay, I know this sucks, but if I push through it, my character will develop just a little bit more. I will be better for it. And so, yeah, I'm on board with all that. Yeah, all that you just said. I think that was a perfect response for that.
And I think there's it's often overlooked that what is on the other side of fear, because fear's so paralyzing sometimes, even if it's just for a minute or for half an hour or whatever. On the other side of fear, if you can get over, and I don't mean get over like put it, get over it. Stop, like feel it. Like what's wrong with actually feeling it? Because the avoidance of it is the effort that you're putting in to avoid it could be far greater than okay, I'm afraid of this. You don't have to go telling everybody around you, but acknowledge it and you take its power just a little bit. Yeah. And then to start to chip away by showing up to it it continues that it continues to chip away.
Mm.
In my experience,
It's kind of a delicate process.
it is. It's, it's like peeling. I use this metaphor when I talk about working out. It's like peeling the onion.
Mm.
You peel that first layer of the skin of the onion, and you have the onion underneath, and then you go you go do the thing that's scary the next day, and you take another layer off, and you look at the onion, and you go, it's the same, it's just as scary, and you go and you do it again, and you take another layer off, and you look at the onion, and you go, that's just as scary, like nothing's happening here. But over the course of you going back at it, like I think of this like with workouts, like nothing's happening here, I'm just sore, this is not working, but I know it's working because I'm peeling the onion every day. I'm confronting the fear, and I'm mixing my working out and fear. It's not the same thing, but they're very slow to change, right?
Yeah.
Your body's slow to change. And if you confront the fear and you peel the onion every day, before long you look at the onion and you think, the day before you looked at it and you thought, no, it's the same, it's just as scary. And then one day you look at it and you go, that darn thing is smaller. I know it's smaller because I'm thinking back to 3 weeks ago or a week ago, and there is a real triumphant feeling of, I've accomplished this.
Yeah.
I've overcome this.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Right. I think that you can look back and reflect in a lot of ways, different things in your life, and probably realize that that's happened, even with, like, say, public speaking or just going out and meeting new people and having to talk to new people. Like, that's something that is terrifying for a lot of kids. But if they just even if they just practiced it in their room,
I was going to say that.
And then like maybe just approached one person who they felt comfortable around. And if they did that, for a week or so, or just, over the course of a year, they would probably at the end of that year or their high school career look back and be like, what happened? I started off with 0 friends and now I'm friends with everyone.
Yep.
That I could see that blossoming into, something like that.
I think too, another piece, and personality plays so much into this, but what about just getting tired of it? Like, get tired of being afraid.
Yeah.
Get tired of it and do something about it. Something small, little, that you can chip away at the fear. Just like you said, talk to yourself in the mirror. I do that when I know ahead of time that I'm going to do public speaking in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, as opposed to a class, because I don't have, when you're a teacher, you get sort of over the 30, 50 people mark. But I last year when I had to present, all I had to do was go up on stage and present the academic team scholarship. But it was honors day. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't really want to be in front of 300 people or whatever.
Yeah.
So I just stood in my closet. I got this big, which sounds weird, but I stood in my closet and I had this big mirror, and I'm like, I knew what I needed to say, and and then driving in the car, I say the thing, like, I'm not going to be afraid of this. It's not going to conquer me.
Yeah.
And I walked out there, and I was a little bit afraid, a little bit. I didn't love it, but hopefully you couldn't tell. It's one of those things where I just chip away and be tired of being afraid or full of anxiety. And it's easy to say, right, but harder to do.
Right. But had you not prepared at all for that?
Oh, I would be terrified. I mean, I would do it.
Yeah.
Because...
And you may not have even appeared to have been scared at all, even if you were petrified and you hadn't practiced.
Maybe.
But you felt a lot more comfortable probably having practiced and been prepared.
Yeah, by comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, we're going long.
Yeah, we are.
It's like maybe our longest one.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think it was a good, do we even hit like half of the stuff you want to talk about?
I don't know. There was a couple notes that I had down, but I never really developed my thoughts very much on them.
You know what we could do? We could say to the kids, like, if you want, we both probably have more thoughts on this. Holler. If you want a part 3.
Yeah.
Is there anything like on your list you're like, I gotta say this?
Not really. I would say, like, what I say to my son, who's 5 years old, when he's scared of things, I say, son, is that something that's scary or is that something that's dangerous? And just realize the difference, that something dangerous needs to be given its own respect, but you don't need to be scared of it. I think that that's something that we can realize going into adulthood, that, things can be scary and things can be dangerous. Like, jumping off of a cliff is kind of dangerous, and we need to approach that with its own respect and prepare and plan for that, but in a different way. But going out into adulthood and approaching life is something that everyone does. Who's blessed to live into their adulthood, and so you can rely on other people to give you wisdom in those areas, and there's a lot of preparation that can be done and should be done for that. But just understanding what needs to be given a fear, and what needs to be put in the category of fear and scary, and what needs to be put in the category of dangerous. And sometimes it's good to approach dangerous things. Like I can think back to this past summer. I was visiting my friend down in Florida, and he's got a couple 100-acre farm, and we were going to go hog hunt. And it got to the point where it was dark out, and we were in the middle of the Florida swamp. And he was like, "Okay, dude," and he's a Marine friend of mine. We both were deployed together. And he said, "Dude, this just went from a hog hunt to we need to get back to the trucks now." And I could see fear in his eyes, and I was like, "Dude, I don't like this at all." And we were put into this position where I was actually very scared.
Was it alligators?
Yeah, so gators, black bears, and venomous snakes.
Wow.
Everywhere and we ended up, actually, I shouldn't say this probably too much, but we ended up shooting like 6 venomous snakes on our way out that were on the path that we were walking. So it was actually, and his headlamp had gone out, so we had one headlamp. It was crazy. But we were so, like, our adrenaline was so crazy, it was pumping through our blood when we got back, and we just kind of sat there and laughed at the end of it, like, dude, we needed that. We needed that. So it's good to go out there, but I mean, that could have ended very poorly for one of us,
Sounds like it.
But it was good. It was like a refreshing adrenaline rush that I needed.
Adrenaline dump.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So we should probably wrap it up. The one other thing that I just made a note on before was we made mention that we both listened to Huberman Labs, and he has some really practical techniques on breathing.
Oh, these are great. I shared this with my college prep and honors kids before the Lilly scholarship writing, and I think some of them really appreciated it.
Yeah. So there's that time that it takes for your body to recover from that adrenaline and cortisol dump that it gets, but there are also ways that you can breathe to naturally combat that and bring yourself back from that a little bit quicker. And so I would encourage anyone who is experiencing any kind of fear or anxiety to research some of those breathing techniques, and it might help them out.
Yeah, and there's 2 of them that I kind of show my kids in class. They are a little strange, and there's great YouTube videos on them. Just look up Huberman breathing techniques. I think that probably works.
Yeah.
But they work. I've had I just talked about it to kids a month ago, and they came back and said, "I used it and it works."
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe how well it works.
Well, I hope we covered everything that is going to be helpful and practical for the students who are listening. And if you have any questions for us, or want to know anything, want to pick our brains anymore, just certainly reach out. And if we need to do an episode, we'll do another one.
Yeah, and you don't have to be our current students. Like, I think sometimes it can be scary to walk up to, particularly maybe one of us, and but we're friendly folks.
Yeah,
and we encourage building relationships with kids that we don't even have in the classroom. So
that's funny. I put a poll out, and I asked my students what they were scared of, and 2 of them said me. And I'm like, come on, guys, you've known me for 3 years.
They were just messing with you.
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
All right. Well, that's all for today. Remember, if you're a student at GCHS, email us a question. Yours might be next. Thanks for listening.